The distress signal. The message from the stars. The night shift at the Lunar Farside Observatory was usually quiet. Dr. Sarah Chin sat alone in the dimly lit control room, her eyes fixed on the cascading data streams that monitored deep space. For 3 years she had worked at this isolated facility, searching for signs of intelligent life among the stars. Most nights brought nothing but cosmic noise and the occasional pulsar signal. But tonight was different. At exactly 0237 hours, every monitor in the facility erupted with activity. The signal was unlike anything in their database. It pulsed with mathematical precision, encoding information in a pattern that could only be artificial. Sarah's hands trembled as she initiated the recording protocols. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for since the first radio telescope pointed skyward. "Command, this is Lunar Station 7, she spoke into her headset, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have an intelligence signal. I repeat, we have confirmed alien communication." Within minutes, the control room filled with scientists and military personnel who had been sleeping in the adjacent quarters. Director Thomas Walsh pushed through the crowd, his gray hair disheveled from sleep. "Play it back," he ordered. The speakers crackled to life with a sound that was both beautiful and haunting. It wasn't just noise or mathematical sequences. It was a voice, translated through some kind of universal communication protocol that their computers could barely comprehend. As the facility's artificial intelligence worked to decode the message, fragments of meaning began to emerge on the screens. "Help, dying. Kryn destroys, please, anyone." The world responds. 18 hours later, the United Nations Emergency Assembly convened in Geneva. Every nation on Earth had a representative present. The decoded message played on enormous screens for all to see. The voice belonged to someone calling themselves Valori, a peaceful civilization located 43 light-years from Earth. Their world was under siege. Admiral Marcus Kane stood before the assembly, his decorated uniform bearing the insignia of the newly formed United Earth Space Command. At 58 years old, Kane had served in 3 major conflicts and earned a reputation as both a brilliant strategist and a man of unwavering principle. His presence commanded respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane began, his deep voice carrying across the silent chamber. 3 days ago we confirmed we are not alone in the universe. Today we must decide what kind of neighbors we will be." The decoded transmission continued to play behind him. The Valori had detected Earth's radio signals decades ago and had been quietly observing humanity, waiting for the right moment to make contact. That moment never came peacefully. Instead, their first message to Earth was a desperate cry for survival. The Valori explained their situation in fragments of transmitted data. They were a civilization of scientists, artists, and philosophers who had never developed weapons of war. Their society had flourished for thousands of years in peace. Then came the Kryn Empire, a militaristic species that expanded through conquest and subjugation. The Kryn had already destroyed 6 Valori colony worlds. Their homeworld would fall within weeks. "Why should we risk human lives for aliens we've never met?" demanded the Russian delegate, his question echoing what many were thinking. Admiral Kane turned to face the assembly. "Because they reached out to us in their darkest hour. Because we have the capability to help. And because if we ignore this, we set a precedent for humanity's place in the galaxy as cowards who abandon those in need." The decision. The debate raged for 6 hours. Military advisors warned that humanity had never tested its weapons beyond the solar system. Scientists argued they knew nothing about Kryn technology or capabilities. Economic ministers worried about the resources required for an interstellar military operation. But Dr. Chin, who had been brought to Geneva to testify, offered a different perspective. "The Valori have sent us something more than a cry for help," she explained, displaying additional data on the screens. "They've transmitted technical specifications for faster-than-light travel. They've given us the stars, asking nothing in return except that we consider helping them." Captain James Wu of the Chinese Space Force stood to address the assembly. At 34 he was the youngest person in the room, but his reputation as an exceptional pilot and tactical thinker had earned him a seat at this historic gathering. "We've spent centuries preparing for this moment," Wu said, his voice passionate. "Every nation here has invested in space technology, defense systems, and military capabilities. Now we know why. This isn't just about the Valori. This is about what kind of species humanity will be when we step onto the galactic stage." The Secretary General called for a vote at 1900 hours. The resolution was simple. Authorize the United Earth Space Command to render military assistance to the Valori civilization. The chamber fell silent as the votes were tallied electronically. When the results appeared on the screens, the chamber erupted in gasps. The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth had agreed to humanity's first interstellar war. Preparation for the unknown. Admiral Kane wasted no time. Within hours, military bases across Earth mobilized. The Mars orbital shipyards, originally designed for asteroid mining operations, began converting civilian vessels into warships. Engineers worked around the clock to integrate Valori FTL technology into human ships that had never been designed to leave the solar system. Dr. Chen led a team of scientists in analyzing every piece of data the Valori had transmitted about the Kryn. They were reptilian, heavily armored, and their technology focused on overwhelming firepower. They conquered through fear and superiority of force. They had never encountered serious resistance. Captain Wu assembled a strike force of the best pilots from every nation. Fighter craft designed for space combat within Earth's orbit were hastily modified for interstellar combat. Weapons systems were upgraded. Crews trained in zero-gravity combat scenarios. In a secret facility beneath the Gobi Desert, military strategists developed battle plans based on one crucial advantage. The Kryn had no idea Earth existed. They didn't know humans were coming. The element of surprise would be humanity's greatest weapon. As the fleet prepared to launch, Admiral Kane stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching Earth rotate below. Communications Officer Lieutenant Maria Santos approached him with a message. "Sir, we've received another transmission from the Valori. They're asking if anyone received their distress call. They sound hopeless." Kane's jaw tightened. "Send a response. Tell them help is coming. Tell them Earth heard their cry, and we're bringing fire and fury the Kryn have never imagined." 10 days after the first signal reached Earth, 32 warships equipped with experimental FTL drives launched from Mars orbit. They carried 12,000 personnel, enough weapons to level a continent, and humanity's first message to the galaxy. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves." The journey to Valori Prime would take 6 days. The Kryn Empire had no idea that their routine conquest was about to become their worst nightmare. Earth had answered the call for help, and nothing would ever be the same. First contact with violence. The jump into hell. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valori system, and what they saw ignited a fury that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Captain James Wu stood on the bridge of the strike carrier, defiant, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. Through the view screen, Valori Prime burned. Massive Kryn battleships, each the size of a small city, hung in orbit like vultures circling dying prey. Streams of plasma fire rained down on the planet's surface, turning cities into molten craters. Smaller Kryn fighters swarmed through the atmosphere, hunting down evacuation ships filled with civilian refugees. Wu watched in horror as a Valori transport, its hull marked with medical symbols, exploded under concentrated fire. "Sir, we're detecting over 40 Kryn capital ships and hundreds of support craft," reported Lieutenant Santos from the sensor station. "They're conducting systematic orbital bombardment of population centers." Admiral Kane's voice crackled through the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Kane. We're looking at a genocide in progress. I know we're outnumbered. I know we're outgunned. I know most of you have never fired a weapon in anger. But those people down there asked us for help, and by God, we're going to give it to them." Wu felt his heart hammering in his chest. His fighter wing consisted of 42 pilots, most barely out of their 20s, sitting in spacecraft that had been welding together in Martian shipyards just days ago. They were about to face an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. "All pilots, this is Captain Wu. Remember your training. The Kryn have never faced humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. Let's show them why Earth doesn't abandon its friends. Launch on my mark." The mad warriors from Seoul. The Kryn commander, War Master Zax, lounged in his command throne aboard the dreadnought, Eternal Conquest. The conquest of Valori Prime was proceeding exactly as planned. The pathetic Valori had no weapons, no defense, no will to fight. In another day, maybe two, the planet would be pacified, and its survivors would serve the Kryn Empire as slaves. His tactical officer's sudden alarm interrupted his satisfaction. War Master, were detecting unknown vessels entering the system. 32 ships, configuration unknown. They're not Valori. Zax's scaled lips curled back, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Probably some neighboring species coming to plead for mercy. Destroy them. Make an example that the galaxy will remember. But within minutes, Zax realized something was terribly wrong. The unknown ships didn't broadcast surrender. They didn't request negotiation. Instead, they accelerated directly toward his fleet at speeds that seemed suicidal, and then they opened fire. The first volley of human railgun projectiles struck 3 Kryn cruisers before their shields could adjust. Tungsten rounds traveling at a significant fraction of light speed punched through energy barriers designed to stop plasma weapons. The cruisers exploded in brilliant cascades of fire and debris. What was that? Zax roared, his confidence evaporating. What kind of primitive kinetic weapons bypass our shields? Wu's fighter wing screamed into the battle space at velocities that made his vision blur. The Kryn fighters moved to intercept, but they flew in tight, predictable formations, doctrine written for opponents who followed galactic combat conventions. Humans didn't. Break formation, Wu ordered. Combat spread delta. Weapons free. The human pilots scattered in 3 dimensions, using random evasion patterns that confused Kryn targeting systems. Wu rolled his fighter 90 degrees, lined up a Kryn interceptor in his sights, and fired a burst from his rotary cannon. The weapon, a modified version of ancient aircraft Gatling guns, spat out hundreds of depleted uranium rounds per second. The Kryn fighter disintegrated. They're using ballistic projectiles. A Kryn pilot screamed over the communications channel before a missile from Lieutenant Chen's fighter turned him into expanding plasma. Unconventional warfare. Admiral Kane watched the battle unfold from the flag bridge of the battleship, Indomitable. The tactical display showed chaos as human ships wove between Kryn capital ships, too close for the massive vessels to target effectively. It was exactly what he'd planned. Deploy the surprise packages, Kane ordered calmly. Throughout the fleet, cargo bays opened and released thousands of small objects that looked like space debris. The Kryn ignored them, focused on the warships that were tearing through their formations. That was their fatal mistake. The objects were actually autonomous drone mines, programmed with simple but devastating instructions. Find Kryn ships, attach and detonate. They swarmed toward the enemy fleet like a plague of mechanical insects. Kryn point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Hundreds of mines attached themselves to hull plating, weapon emplacements, and engine nacelles. Detonate, Kane said. The Kryn fleet lit up with thousands of simultaneous explosions. None were large enough to destroy a capital ship outright, but the cumulative damage was catastrophic. Weapon systems failed. Shields flickered and collapsed. Engine power dropped to critical levels. War Master Zax stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than 20 minutes, his fleet had lost 18 ships and countless fighters. The unknown enemy was using tactics the Kryn had never encountered. They fought without honor, without formation discipline, without any regard for galactic conventions of warfare. Who are these savages? Zax demanded. His communication officer's voice trembled. War Master, we've intercepted their transmissions. They call themselves humans. From a world called Earth. And War Master, they're broadcasting a message. Admiral Kane's face appeared on every Kryn view screen in the system. Attention Kryn forces. This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the United Earth Space Command. You are currently engaging in the systematic extermination of a peaceful civilization. As of this moment, humanity is at war with the Kryn Empire. You have one chance to withdraw from this system. If you refuse, we will destroy you. Zax's roar of fury echoed through his ship. These primitives dare threaten the Kryn Empire? All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship. Teach these humans what happens to those who defy us. The price of arrogance. The Kryn fleet began to regroup, bringing their superior numbers to bear. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids swiveled toward human vessels. For a moment, it seemed the tide of battle might turn. Then humanity showed the galaxy something new, the willingness to sacrifice for victory. Captain Wu saw the Kryn focusing their fire on Admiral Kane's flagship. The Indomitable was taking devastating hits, its shields dropping rapidly. Wu made his decision in a heartbeat. All fighters form on me. We're going in. Sir, that's suicide, Lieutenant Chen protested. No, Wu replied, his voice steady. That's duty. Follow me. Wu's fighter wing dove directly into the concentrated fire zone, drawing Kryn attention away from the flagship. Human pilots dodged and weaved through plasma bolts that turned space into a deadly light show. 3 fighters were hit and vaporized instantly. But their sacrifice bought precious seconds. The Indomitable launched a weapon the Kryn had never seen, a relativistic kinetic kill vehicle, essentially a telephone pole-sized piece of tungsten accelerated to 90% of light speed. It struck the Kryn dreadnought, Eternal Conquest, amidships. The physics were simple and brutal. At relativistic speeds, mass became energy. The impact released the equivalent of multiple nuclear weapons. The Eternal Conquest didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist along with War Master Zax and his entire crew. The shockwave from the impact damaged a dozen nearby Kryn ships. The enemy fleet, suddenly leaderless and facing an enemy that fought with incomprehensible ferocity, began to break apart. Some ships tried to flee. Others transmitted surrender requests. A few fought on with stubborn pride. Admiral Kane's voice rang out across the fleet. Disable surrendering vessels. Destroy any ship that continues firing. And someone get me a casualty report. The battle lasted another 40 minutes before the last Kryn ship either surrendered or was destroyed. When the shooting finally stopped, the human fleet had lost 6 ships and 93 fighters. Nearly 2,000 personnel would never see Earth again. But the Kryn had lost their entire siege fleet, 41 capital ships and over 300 support craft. The Mad Warriors arrived. As human marines boarded disabled Kryn vessels, Captain Wu brought his battered fighter in for landing on the Defiant. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the controls. He'd lost 12 pilots from his wing, people he'd trained with, laughed with, considered family. Lieutenant Santos met him in the hangar bay. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. We got a message from the Valori surface. They're calling us saviors. They're saying we fought like demons, like nothing they've ever seen. Wu pulled off his helmet, his dark hair plastered to his skull with sweat. We fought like humans, Lieutenant. We did what we came here to do. On the planet below, Valori survivors emerged from shelters to see the Kryn fleet burning in orbit and strange new ships bearing an unfamiliar symbol, a blue and green world surrounded by olive branches and arrows. The Valori had never seen weapons before. They had never understood violence. But they understood this. When they called for help, Earth answered with fire and fury. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching damage control teams work to repair his ship. His communication officer approached with a priority message. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from Kryn High Command. They're demanding to know who attacked their fleet. They're threatening retaliation against Earth. Kane's expression was hard as steel. Send them our coordinates. Tell them that the Kryn Empire just learned what happens when they threaten the defenseless. Tell them Earth is coming for them next. And tell them we don't make threats. We make promises. Across the Kryn Empire, military leaders received the transmission and saw footage of the battle at Valori Prime. They saw their invincible fleet shattered by an unknown species using primitive weapons and insane tactics. They saw humans who fought with a creativity